the updates. But these are the financiers that are making billions, including Paul the Vulture Singer. Because when you look at Greece, what you're looking at is a crime scene.
Yep.
Okay, it's a crime scene. Okay, it's not about the Eurocrisis. The Euro's doing fine, by the way. In fact, if you read my Guardian USA piece a few days ago online, you would see that by the way, I was a student of Milton Friedman's. I was a protege of Friedman. And so I worked with all the people around him, including Bob Mundell, who got the Nobel Prize for coming up with the Europa, or which is now the Euro. And Mundell told me, and I have it, by the way, on tape, so you couldn't bitch about it. I always carried tape recorders for decades. Mundell said the purpose of the Euro was to eliminate labor unions and all government regulation in the continent. How do you take apart an established welfare state? He said what you do is you push on them, you get them to agree to a currency system, a financial system where the politicians, as they call it, meaning democratic elected officials, have no control over fiscal policy, no control over monetary policy. He says as soon as there's a crisis, any crisis at all, they will have only one thing they can do, which is to reduce wages, end union power, end any type of regulation so that they can compete against each other for jobs. You know, when they keep talking about labor reform, they mean labor screwing labor to death with no Vaseline, right? So they're always talking about competing. By the way, they never say who they're competing against. If everyone is racing to destroy worker protections, who is left to compete against? Except the Chinese. And you're not going to be able to beat Chinese prison labor. Or maybe they think that you ought to. So, at any rate, it's not a crisis of the euro. This is planned. As my buddy Joe Stiglitz says, and you'll read it in the book too, when I have the inside information from the IMF and all these documents that he's verified are true, I said, looks like they put the riots into the plan. He said, yeah, we used to call them the IMF riots. He was the chief economist for the World Bank. They had the riots in the plan. That's what it's all about. When you see those fires, again, Greece is a crime scene. Now, what happened there? Goldman Sachs got a $500 million fee for running a currency swap scam which hid the deficit of Greece. Why should that even be a matter of? Why should that be a concern? Because to be in the Euro, we talk about the Eurozone being a coin. It's actually a set of restrictions which says you can't have more than 3% GDP annual deficit or 60% GDP debt. The only way to make that is you have to sell everything. As soon as there's a crisis, no nation can live within those restrictions unless, of course, you commit a fraud, which they did with the bank. Goldman Sachs gets a $500 million about it, knows that when this gets exposed, as it has to be at some point, that's a collapse. And since they're on the inside, knowing what's going on, they are selling credit default swaps, making a killing, and then getting out of the credit default swaps when they know that those swaps will be called in and at the collapse. They made it on all ways. They set the fire, they collect the insurance, and then they buy the assets at the fire sale. That's the program. Nothing went wrong. That's the euro. There's no euro crisis. There's a euro plan, and you are living in it. And if you wonder where the plan starts, to do all this, how can you even have nations dealing with credit default swaps and currency swaps at all? And the answer is that you had to have a massive deregulation and ending of the criminal laws preventing shifting of capital worldwide. So you could decriminalize manipulation of capital and currency. We call it deregulation. It's decriminalization. Okay. Now, I have a document, confidential. I got a lot of these things. I like anything marked confidential or secret. This is what I call the Magna Carta of globalization. This is from, Department of Treasury. It is a memorandum from Ambassador Tim Geithner, who is now our Secretary of the Treasury, to Larry Summers, who is about to become the Treasury Secretary, and later with Geithner, the so-called economic czar of the U.S. under Obama as they returned. They're under Clinton now, and under the direct direction of Robert Rubin. They're about to deregulate the banks, which would allow the creation of something called Citicorp, a kind of two-headed monster that was both an investment bank, which is a fancy word for finance casino, and a commercial bank, where you're supposed to keep your money safe. Okay. And Robert Rubin then, who had been CEO of Goldman Sachs, became Secretary of Treasury, and then returns to the new monster that his laws created within 6 months, and he gets paid $126 million. And then they go bankrupt. The U.S. government buys Citigroup for $2 trillion, and Rubin gets another bonus, and that's how it works, right? Now, but the important thing to me is the document, is what's in this document, of course. And by the way, if you're wondering about the veracity of this document, I couldn't get Geithner or Summers to meet with me, but I did get the Director General of the WTO, Pascal Lamy. I get to meet with a lot of these characters, a lot of them because they know me through Milton Friedman, believe it or not, or they know me, I have some other connections. And so Lamy was willing to meet with me. And he begins by, he's telling me, Mr. Palast, here at the WTO we are not a evil cabal of bankers meeting secretly in a cigar smoke-filled room. He really talks like that. In fact, you could see that in our film. And I said, okay, maybe no cigars, but what's this? What's this document? And now what's interesting here, it's Geithner to Summers, and he's saying, he calls it, we are about to enter the end game. The words that these guys use, it's really fun. The end game. What the end game is, there was a meeting. There are 5 phone numbers here, the most important bankers in the U.S. They're private numbers. Citibank, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan. Geithner was reminding Summers to call the boys before they made the final move on the end game. What's the end game? You're about to head into a big bang in Britain, deregulating your banks. And you're about to have deregulation in the U.S. by smashing the Glass-Steagall Act, which separated the casinos from your piggy bank. Okay? Now, if you deregulated in Britain, in London, and you deregulated in New York, decriminalized this type of activity, all the money would start panicking going to safe havens. You have to eliminate the havens. You're going to have to deregulate and decriminalize the movement of capital, the sale of derivatives. This type of financial manipulation would have to be done worldwide. How do you get 155 nations to do this at once? WTO. Until this happened, until this moment, the WTO was about trade, right? Trading in goods. Now they had an idea to allow trade in bads. They were going to use the WTO as a way to require every nation to deregulate its finance market. Under penalty, if they didn't, they would be destroyed economically because they wouldn't be able to trade with the biggest market in the planet, the U.S. and the EC. And by the way, I have another one of these documents, a threat to the one holdout, one nation held out. One nation refused to sign, Brazil. Okay? And Brazil was punished. Its biggest export was ethanol to the United States. They can't sell a cup of ethanol to the United States today because they wouldn't agree to let J.P. Morgan in to sell and trade derivatives. Okay? But they accepted that. And then, and then what happened is, of course, right, this woman here has the punchline, of course, that you were willing to suffer basically an embargo. They're willing to suffer basically an economic siege by the United States and Europe to get out of, to not have to get sucked into this casino maelstrom. And of course, when the planet fell on its knees economically in 2008, Brazil's economy grew by 8% a year. Finally, there's only so much disease if their markets in the U.S. are dying and their markets in Europe have completely evaporated, even Brazil is beginning to slow down. There's a limit. Okay, but they saved themselves because Lula, no fool, and Lula personally had all my stuff translated into Portuguese. Okay. For good reason. They figured it out. They saw it. Now, but the other nations didn't. So here it is. But what's interesting about it is, again, that these are the calls that are being made. When people talk about, oh, do the bankers get together with their political, their political toy boys in a little room and make deals? Yeah, they really do. I mean, conspiracy nuts. I'm often called a conspiracy nut. I'm not. I'm a conspiracy expert. But it always gets a laugh from the conspirators. But it's not about, again, many of you, the one thing about coming here is it's a sophisticated crowd. It's not about that bad guy, that bad Murdoch, right? Bad Enron, bad boys, bad Barclays. Let's spank them. No. Let's spank this system. Okay? We have to spank this system. In fact, one of the things that is a restriction for me, but I just live with it, because it's very important for me to do specific cases to show you exactly how the mechanism works, so that's what I'll report on Newsnight or in The Guardian or wherever. And in the U.S., I have all my Samizdat outlets, because we don't have even what you have, which is sick and diseased and fucked up, but at least you've got something. And we don't have it in the U.S. at all. Fox News, right? That's us.
Infowars.com.
Yeah, Infowars, yeah. Alex Jones, you can hear me on Alex Jones all the time.
Well, Global Research is good. Mikhail Szymanski, that's a left-wing conspiracy. Have you heard of it?
No, that one I haven't got. But, so you'll see me. Fox calls me the American hero of the internet, and they say that with disgust. I'm happy to. Whatever gets me out there. Skywriting. That's your job. Because people ask me, what can we do? And Anna was saying, God, it's so depressing. Tell us something hopeful. Well, the hopeful thing I can say is that you have this massive battle between right now, between the ends of capitalism. There's the vultures, the kind of barbecue billionaires who want things to die. Okay, let me give you an example. Paul the Vulture Singer, #1 donor for Romney. He's in the book there. Okay, he just bought Greek bonds. Okay, for a few nickels on the dollar. Okay. When the ECB and Merkel, who wants to rename the euro the Panzer, when they got together, they decided here's how much they figured they could squeeze Greece without it. They need someone to serve the daiquiris on the cruise ships, so they squeezed as much as they could. And said that's you got to sign off, and the Greeks signed off. In return, the banks, which had relieved Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs of the sovereign debt, so that you hold it. So once the government's holding the bonds, said, okay, we'll wipe out 80%. That's your loss. Greeks, we see what they've lost. Their interest payments are running $11,000 per family. Okay, which is like, it's hard to imagine. No one could survive that. So the thing is that they were when the deal was cut, any bondholder in the planet could actually object to it. Okay. And throughout the entire globe, only one guy objected. Paul the Vulture Singer. He said, I want it all. And he just bought the bonds for nothing. And he said, I want 100% plus interest plus penalties, the whole thing. Or I declare default, and the entire Eurozone, every single bank in the Eurozone is technically in default the minute I say no. Once the Eurozone goes, London goes down, the planet goes down. Everyone but Brazil, China, India, Malaysia, everyone else goes down. Okay, these are financial terrorists who pulled the pin out of the grenade in the helicopter. Yeah. And he said, give me my money. So the Greek government, I kid you not, paid him $165 million to go away. Where they even found it? Well, we know where they found it. They took it out of the blood of the people, and they paid him. But this shook up, let me tell you, did shake up the bloodsuckers of New York. The giant squid was really upset, okay? Because they can't keep letting things die. Okay, so Obama was sent, and Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State, went into a federal court in New York and said, someone has to, the vulture has to be put out of business under a special segment of the U.S. Constitution, which doesn't exist here. This is interference in the conduct of foreign policy of the United States. Obama didn't do it because it's the right thing. He did it because the banks are shitting gold bricks over this. The huge split between these vultures, the Koch brothers, Paul the Vulture Singer, Iceman Simmons. These are the guys that you'll meet in the book. They want these economies to die. They actually have a big theory. You know, Schumpeter's creative destruction. Let it all burn down and it will come back in this free market wonderland. Of course, they will be owning and directing it. The big banks don't want it to burn down. Okay? That they can't handle. They want it to burn, but they want to put out the fire at the right moment. They'll take the assets, they'll take the bonds, but there's a split. That's our opportunity. And that's all in. That's our opportunity. When there's this, when the titans are battling each other. Yeah. Godzilla, you know, versus the vampires, you know, we have a place to occupy. There you go. This is occupation. This is being aware, getting the information out, acting in whatever way you can. I don't have all the answers. I do what I do, which is I just investigate. I'm just an old investigator. I used to be an investigator. I became an investigative reporter. That's what we do. That's what I do. Do what you can do. Whether it's joining Queers for Bradley Manning, who's a massive truth teller and paying the price, whether it's going on YouTube, whether it's tweeting out what you heard here. And for God's sake, I'm going to tell you, you're going to buy these books. And I'll tell you why. Because this is your weapon of mass information. Okay? You have to have the goddamn information. We can't keep talking about the 1%. I want you to have their names, their addresses. I want you to meet their trophy wives that they've discarded. Very interesting people. Good sources of information. Whatever you can do. And then you participate with me. Get on to vulturespicnic.org. Get on my Facebook site, etc. Someone here has some information I need. I know it. Everywhere I go, there's always someone with information, at least a few of you. Ideas, information, spreading the word. I don't care what the hell you do. I don't, by the way, you know, I have put Creative Commons copyright on each segment of the book. That means that you can reproduce it without cost and send it out. Not the whole book, just segments that you find important. Send it out, okay? This all I can add to the story. Stay in contact with me. Give me ideas. That's all I can tell you. So, you know, I'll answer your questions. Let me take like a couple questions, and then I will talk to you individually when I sign books. You know, pay the guy to keep this wonderful thing alive. The fact that there's even a fucking bookstore is revolutionary at this point. So I'll take this first question here.
Yes. Well, recently...
Speak up so people can hear.
Oh, sure. Europe has just decided to demolish the bond market by saying that Europe will buy government debt to lower the interest rates. How does that affect Paul Singer?
Well, that's the whole thing. You had $1 trillion of bonds out there, which are in trouble, and your central banks bought them or guaranteed them, lifted them off the hands of the big banks, so they had nothing to worry about. Now you're the holders, and you're wiping out that. So they're trying to bring down that debt. Someone like Singer wants to make a massive collection. He wants his pound of flesh. So that's the fight there. Obviously, the big banks want to maintain some modicum of economic activity. You know, they're willing to do labor reform, meaning ending union rights. You can be fired. You know, you start working like Americans at will. You know, national health insurance is going to go down the drain. All that stuff. But they still want you to be alive and working. The vultures don't care. So when you're seeing the lowering of interest rates, it's an attempt to try. Well, when you talk about lowering of interest rates, think about this a minute. You've got the Bank of England lending money to your banks at 0.5% interest. In the U.S., it's 0.1% interest, basically free money. Then you're wondering why you can't get a mortgage here. Well, a bank would be out of their fucking minds to lend you money for a mortgage. When they can borrow from the Bank of England at 0.5% and then buy gilts at 2 and 3%, it's money for nothing. And there's zero fucking risk.
That's right.
The U.S. banks are holding $2 trillion, $3 trillion in cash because they're just borrowing it from the Fed's open window and giving it back to the Fed. Here, the same thing is happening. And somehow they expect that if they keep lowering interest rates and there's no lower to go, that will somehow increase economic activity. Obviously, it's not. That's what they're telling you. It's just to give the banks. The ECB has an open window now, is loaning out funds at 1% on the euro. If you're European, you can't borrow at 1%. You can't borrow at any percent. Economic activity is dying. It's all being done to recapitalize the banks, the major banks, so they don't go under. But guys like Paul the Vulture Singer said, let them die. We'll eat. And we'll reform the system. That's the big split. But that's where we can come in and talk about, say, no, we're not going to put up with it.